So ancient philosophers and engineers, they didn't look at humanity and see like a neat biological schematic.
Right. No sterile list of carbon and water neatly categorized on some spreadsheet.
Exactly. When they looked at us, they saw this terrifying volatile mixture, like muddy clay, extreme weather, profound internal contradictions.
And, like, a literal cosmic collision with arrogant fire.
Yeah, which is a radically different way of diagnosing what a human being actually is.
It really is. I mean, when you rely solely on the modern physical schematic, sure, you gain precision, but you lose the existential reality.
Right, you lose the friction.
Yeah.
And that friction is what defines the lived human experience.
And that friction is exactly what we are dissecting today in this deep dive.
We are. We're opening up a centuries-old origin narrative today. So for those of you listening who are, fascinated by human psychology.
Or if you just love analyzing ancient philosophical texts to figure out why we behave the way we do.
Yeah, exactly. Today's source material provides this incredibly rigorous framework for human nature.
The source is an excerpt from a historical sermon by an imam, peace be upon him, and it focuses entirely on a highly specific narrative regarding the creation of Adam.
And let's just state our parameters right at the top here for everyone. We are stepping into an ancient religious text, but our objective is strictly analytical.
Right. We are not here to debate theology.
Not at all. We're just acting as impartial guides to deconstruct the structural logic, the psychological insights, and the poetic mechanisms embedded in this specific narrative.
Because we're treating this text as an architectural blueprint,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
We want to analyze the arguments it presents about the baseline components of human consciousness and how those components are designed to interact with a universe that is often really hostile.
So to do that, we're going to break this text down layer by layer,
We'll look at the precise physical chemistry it describes for a human body.
and the functional burden it places on the intellect, too. Plus, the psychological anatomy of the very first documented prejudice.
Right, and the whole concept that human life is structurally designed to be a trial.
But the text doesn't actually start with the intellect, does it?
No, it doesn't. It argues that to understand the complex cognitive software of a human, you first have to understand the literal, raw hardware.
So we have to start in the dirt.
Exactly, at the very literal bottom.
Okay, so let's look at the opening line. It says that God gathered earth from, quote, the hard and soft terrain, and from its sweet and salty soil.
Which is such a specific detail.
It is. And honestly, I have a fundamental issue with this premise right out of the gate.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, if we are operating in a narrative that features an omnipotent creator, the entire concept of gathering materials is logically redundant.
I see what you mean.
Right? An all-powerful entity doesn't need a supply chain. They don't need to, source ingredients.
No, they don't.
So the fact that this narrative explicitly details the sourcing of hard and soft, sweet and salty terrain, that means the physical origin of the dirt is doing some heavy philosophical lifting.
It's a deliberate design choice. It's not a manufacturing constraint.
Exactly. Why not just snap it into existence?
Well, that is the exact right analytical lens to use here. The text is intentionally bypassing the concept of spontaneous ex nihilo creation.
Right. No finger snapping and appearing out of nothing.
Right. It does that to establish a foundational argument about human composition. By explicitly gathering from the hard and soft, the sweet and salty, the narrative anchors humanity to the absolute extremes of the physical world.
So it sets up a biological vessel that is inherently fragmented from the start.
Completely. I mean, think about soil chemistry.
Yeah, sweet soil is alkaline, salty soil is acidic or, heavily laden with halite.
And they produce entirely different ecosystems.
Right, you can't grow the same crops in them. They're chemically opposed.
Exactly. And by bringing those opposed elements together, the text establishes something crucial. It's saying human diversity is not some later mutation.
Or like a byproduct of societal evolution.
Right. The blueprint dictates that humanity is intrinsically, fundamentally diverse from the very first particle.
It essentially maps the physical properties of the Earth directly onto human sociology.
It does.
Because the hard and soft terrain isn't just about geology, is it? It seems to be a clear analog for human temperament.
It's a direct psychophysiological mapping, and we see this in everyday human interaction all the time.
Like how some temperaments are just rigid and unyielding.
Yeah, structurally resilient. That's the hard terrain. They can withstand immense pressure, but they don't adapt easily.
Right, whereas others are highly malleable, empathetic, and yielding.
The soft terrain. They adapt quickly, but they can also be easily crushed.
And the sweet and salty applies just as easily, I think. You have personalities that are accommodating and pleasant.
The social glue,
Yeah.
basically.
And then you have the salty personalities. Cynical, abrasive, sharp.
So what the text is arguing is that if you encounter an abrasive, difficult person or a deeply soft, vulnerable person, they aren't deviations from the norm.
They are literally representing specific ratios of the original ingredient list.
Exactly. But then the text immediately moves to the mechanism of how you actually combine those highly volatile, contradictory elements.
Because they naturally repel each other.
Right. So it states this gathered earth was, quote, infused with water until it became pure, and then kneaded with moisture until it became cohesive and sticky.
Okay, the word needed there implies a really significant application of time and kinetic energy.
It does. You don't just pour water on dirt and instantly get a cohesive structure.
No, you just get mud.
Right. Kneading requires folding, pressing, and breaking down resistance over and over again.
It is a process of forcing disparate elements to bond at a molecular level.
And that mechanical process is so vital to the metaphor. Water, universally in ancient philosophies, acts as the agent of life.
Purification, flow, all of that.
Yeah. Here, it's the solvent that forces the alkaline and the acidic, the hard and the soft, to stop repelling each other.
So the kneading process is what generates that cohesive and sticky quality.
Essentially, the text is saying that the human physical form is held together by immense applied tension.
Which leads right into the next phase of the construction, which is heavily structural.
Right, the sculpting phase.
The text says God sculpted a form possessing curves and joints, limbs, and segments.
It describes a biological machine with articulating parts.
Yeah, but it's the very next sentence that completely shifts the tone for me. It says, he solidified it until it held firm and hardened it until it sounded like ringing clay.
The ringing clay, that is arguably the most striking sensory detail in the entire passage.
It changes the state of matter entirely. We go from something sticky and cohesive, which implies like wetness and malleability,
to something that has been entirely stripped of its moisture.
right. But to understand the implications of that, we really have to look at the physics of resonance.
Yeah, why does clay actually ring?
Well, if you strike wet mud, it just yields a dull thud, right? Because the moisture dampens the kinetic energy.
The water just absorbs the shock completely.
But when you bake clay, you drive out all that water. You lock the molecular structure into a rigid crystalline lattice.
So when kinetic energy hits that baked structure, it has nowhere to be absorbed.
Exactly. So it reverberates.
And for it to truly ring, for it to act as an acoustic resonator like a bell, it has to be hollow.
It must be an empty vessel.
And that is the existential horror, or maybe the existential suspense of this specific moment in the narrative.
The suspense of just waiting.
Yeah, you have this highly complex structure. It has curves, joints, and segments. It is perfectly biologically proportioned.
But it is completely void of a driver.
It is an echo chamber. It highlights the stark difference between a perfectly constructed anatomical object and a truly living subject.
An echo chamber waiting for a voice. That implies the human vessel was specifically engineered to amplify whatever is placed inside of it.
Right, but the narrative introduces a really interesting delay here.
It doesn't fill the vessel immediately, does it?
No, it states that this state of ringing clay lasted for a computed time and a known duration.
A computed time. That phrase completely rejects the idea of random chance.
It really argues for mathematical precision in the gestation of humanity.
Right, whether you interpret this through the lens of evolutionary biology, like billions of years of cosmic refinement to arrive at a bipedal hominid.
Or through a literal interpretation of a divine delay.
The mechanism is the exact same. Time is an active ingredient.
So why do you think the delay is necessary, structurally speaking?
Well, because if you introduce immense energy into a vessel before it has fully hardened, before the structure is completely set, the vessel shatters.
It just breaks apart.
Yeah. The text implies that the physical human form had to reach an exact state of structural readiness before it could handle the metaphysical load that was about to be dropped into it.
The metaphysical load, that is the perfect way to transition to the next sequence.
So we have this hollow, hardened statue, right? Built from the chemical extremes of the earth, waiting in absolute silence.
How does the narrative describe the mechanism of turning the system on?
The text provides a very explicit demarcation line between hardware and software here. It says, then he breathed into it of his spirit, and it stood as a human being.
The infusion of the spirit acts as the ignition sequence.
But I want to look really closely at what the text claims this spirit actually provides. because it completely abandons the anatomical language of joints and curves.
Right. It immediately lists cognitive tools instead.
Let's examine the inventory of what this new human being now possesses. The text states it has an intellect to exercise, thoughts to navigate with, limbs to serve him, organs to employ, and knowledge to discern between truth and falsehood.
The phrasing there is what always catches my attention. It doesn't frame cognition as a passive state of being.
No, it uses action verbs. An intellect to exercise, thoughts to navigate with.
Which suggests the mind isn't a hard drive where data is merely stored.
Right, it is a mechanical tool that requires manual operation, like a steering wheel.
It implies neuroplasticity, in a sense.
Yeah.
A muscle that isn't exercised atrophies.
And an intellect that isn't actively engaged degrades.
The narrative is outlining the severe responsibility of consciousness here. You are not just given intelligence, you are given an engine that you are required to run.
And look at what the engine is actually designed to do. Discern between truth and falsehood.
Which implies an environment, doesn't it?
Totally. If you build a boat, it implies the existence of water.
Right.
If you equip a human with a highly tuned instrument, specifically designed to separate truth from falsehood, it guarantees that the human is about to be dropped into an environment saturated with deception.
That is a critical deduction. The tools we are equipped with dictate the nature of the reality we must inhabit.
The world this text envisions is not a clear, obvious utopia.
No, it is a labyrinth. You need thoughts to navigate with because the path is obscured.
You need discernment because reality will actively lie to you.
But the text doesn't stop at cognitive tools. It goes deeper into the actual operating system of the human being.
It defines the human as a mixture. And I want to quote this exactly because the word choice is fascinating.
Go for it.
It says, "We are a mixture needed from clays of varying colors, harmonious resemblances, antagonistic opposites, and diverging elements, comprising heat and cold, moisture and dryness, sorrow and joy."
Antagonistic opposites. That is the theoretical core of this entire document.
It really is. It is treating physical thermodynamics like heat and cold, moisture and dryness as equivalent architectural materials to psychological states like sorrow and joy.
It lumps them all into the exact same structural category.
Which is wild. How does a physical state map so directly onto an emotional one?
Well, if we look at how human beings actually metabolize emotion, it is entirely physiological.
Yeah.
The text is not using a metaphor here, it is anticipating psychophysiology. When we experience severe anxiety, what happens? We experience a drop in peripheral temperature.
The cold sweat.
Exactly. When we experience rage, we describe it as being hot-headed. Our capillaries dilate, our body heat literally rises.
And joy is often associated with warmth and lightness.
While profound sorrow is universally described with the language of coldness, heaviness, and dryness, a complete lack of vitality.
So the hardware dictates the software.
Yes.
But what does it actually mean to be fundamentally built out of antagonistic opposites?
It means that you are designed to be a contradiction. It means that the human being is not a unified, single variable entity.
You are an ecosystem of competing forces.
Right. By stating that sorrow and joy, heat and cold are the baseline ingredients, the text makes a radical claim about mental health in the human condition.
It completely reframes how we view internal friction, doesn't it?
Precisely. I mean, modern frameworks often pathologize negative emotions.
Yeah, if someone experiences prolonged sorrow or internal conflict, our immediate societal assumption is that the machine is broken.
We treat sorrow like a virus that has infected a system meant only for joy.
But this ancient text argues the exact inverse. It states that sorrow is a load-bearing pillar in your structural architecture.
You cannot remove the pillar without collapsing the building. Without the hard terrain, the soft terrain has no meaning. Without the capacity for the profound dryness of sorrow, the moisture of joy cannot be registered by the system.
Because there's no contrast.
Right. The human being is defined by the tension between these states.
Okay, so you have this creature. It is anchored in the dirt, prone to the gravitational pull of physical elements like heat and dryness.
But it is simultaneously elevated by the infusion of a divine spirit and an active intellect.
So it is literally pulled in two completely different directions. It is a walking contradiction.
A highly unstable, hyper-complex contradiction.
Which means introducing this feature into the universe is going to cause immediate problems.
No, absolutely.
You don't drop a multi-variable, contradiction-filled system into a previously stable environment without causing a massive disruption to the status quo.
And the narrative immediately shifts to that cosmic disruption, because up until this point, the universe described in these types of texts is populated mostly by angels.
Celestial beings that operate in a frictionless state of absolute obedience.
Exactly. They are single variable entities. They do exactly what they are designed to do without any internal contradiction.
And then the Creator introduces Adam. But the Creator doesn't just quietly place him in the corner.
No, the text says God demanded from the angels the fulfillment of a trust deposited with them and a pledge of his command.
He orders the entire existing cosmic hierarchy to submit, to prostrate themselves, and to honor this new, muddy, contradictory creation.
It is the ultimate stress test of the celestial social contract.
The Creator is essentially saying, I have engineered a new variable. It operates on parameters you do not understand.
And your pledge requires you to defer to my engineering even if it appears inferior to you.
Right, and the text notes that the angels comply. It says, so they prostrated. The hierarchy holds.
But then we hit the pivot point of the entire narrative.
Yeah, the text says, except Iblis and his tribe.
The introduction of the antagonist, the first recorded rebellion.
But, the text doesn't just say he rebelled. It provides a forensic psychological diagnosis of exactly why the rebellion occurred. It really does.
It states, arrogance overtook them and wretchedness overpowered them. They felt arrogant due to their creation from fire and belittled the creation from sounding clay.
It is a masterclass in the anatomy of prejudice.
I look at this and I see the exact mechanism of material snobbery.
Right. I am fire, he is dirt.
Exactly. Iblis looks at the human, this being infused with an active intellect and a divine spirit, and he completely ignores the software.
He only looks at the hardware.
He says, I am made of fire. Fire goes up. Fire provides light. Fire consumes. This new thing is made of dirt. Dirt is at the bottom. Dirt gets stepped on. Ergo, I am superior.
What Iblis does is reduce a high-complexity subject to a low-complexity stereotype.
Which is the fundamental mechanism of all prejudice.
Exactly. Confronted with a being of harmonious resemblances and antagonistic opposites, a complexity he simply cannot process, Iblis retreats to the simplest possible binary metric.
Physical origin.
My raw material is better than your raw material. And the irony, which the text implies by focusing on the material origins, is that Iblis's metric is flawed even on its own terms.
Oh, totally. He boasts about fire. But what is the actual nature of fire?
It is chaotic, uncontainable, and entirely destructive.
Right. It cannot sustain anything. It only consumes the fuel it is given until nothing is left.
Clay, on the other hand, is generative. It holds moisture. It provides a stable matrix for seeds to grow.
It can be sculpted into a vessel capable of holding a spirit.
Fire can't act as a vessel. If you pour water into fire, they destroy each other.
Right. Fire lacks the capacity for cohesion. But arrogance does not tolerate nuance.
I want to dig into the phrase the text uses right before it mentions the fire. It says, arrogance overtook them and wretchedness overpowered them.
It links arrogance directly to wretchedness.
Which feels completely counterintuitive of how we normally perceive arrogant figures today. We usually view them as possessing an inflated sense of self-worth.
But we view the symptom, not the disease. The text is making a highly sophisticated psychological assertion here.
Which is
that true arrogance is almost always a defense mechanism deployed to mask profound wretchedness or inadequacy.
So it's a form of narcissistic injury.
Precisely. Put yourself in the antagonist's position within the narrative. Iblis has operated at the top of the hierarchy. He possesses power derived from fire.
And suddenly, the Creator introduces a new system, Adam.
A system that possesses an intellect to exercise and the capacity to discern truth from falsehood.
Tools that imply a depth of consciousness Iblis may not possess at all.
Right. Iblis is confronted with an existential threat to his status.
He feels inadequate. The wretchedness overpowers him.
He feels the terror of obsolescence. And rather than processing that complex, painful emotion, he deploys a psychological shield.
He masks the wretchedness with the arrogance of his material origin. I may not understand this new creature, but at least I am made of fire. At least I am not dirt.
It is a coping mechanism.
But it is a coping mechanism that violates the trust deposited with them. It breaks the pledge.
Iblis decides that his subjective assessment of reality, that fire is superior to clay, supersedes the objective command of the Creator.
His ego overrides his obedience.
Which brings us to the most structurally fascinating part of the text, I think. The rebellion has occurred. The antagonist has clearly revealed himself. The pre-existing social contract has been broken.
Now, in almost any other narrative structure, whether it's a historical monarchy, a corporate boardroom, or some mythological pantheon, when a subordinate publicly and arrogantly defies the absolute sovereign, the result is instantaneous elimination.
The king executes the traitor.
The CEO fires the insubordinate executive. Power protects itself through immediate suppression.
But this narrative does not do that. It introduces a highly calculated, meticulously defined delay.
The text says, consequently, God the Exalted granted him a respite, a stay of execution.
And it doesn't just leave it as a mystery either. It explicitly lists 3 functional reasons for this delay.
Right, it says the respite is granted, 1, so that he may fully earn his wrath, 2, to complete the trial of humanity, and 3, to fulfill the promise.
And then it quotes the divine decree. Indeed, you are of those given respite until the day of the time well known.
Let's analyze the structural engineering of this respite, starting with the second reason, to complete the trial of humanity. What does this actually imply about the nature of the human operating system?
Well, this is where it gets really profound.
Because this is where I struggle with the narrative logic, or at least where I find it highly provocative.
How so?
We just spent all this time establishing that the human is a masterpiece of engineering. It has an active intellect. It has discernment. It is a perfectly balanced mixture of antagonistic opposites.
Right.
So why does a masterpiece require a trial? Why intentionally leave a known, highly motivated, arrogant antagonist in the ecosystem with your brand new creation?
Because a tool that is never used is functionally identical to a tool that doesn't exist.
Okay, unpack that mechanism for me.
Go back to the specific cognitive inventory we talked about. The human was given an intellect to exercise, not just to possess.
Right, an engine you have to run.
Exactly. It was given knowledge to discern between truth and falsehood. Now, if you place this human in a completely sterile, frictionless environment, a universe where only truth exists.
Where there is no deception, no arrogance, and no antagonist.
Right. How does the human exercise discernment in that environment?
It can't. There is nothing to discern.
The software cannot run without data to process. The narrative is arguing that Iblis, the antagonist, is not a glitch that the creator failed to patch.
Iblis is functionally integrated into the human experience.
He is the necessary resistance.
He provides the friction required for the intellect to actually act as a muscle.
The trial is the gymnasium for human consciousness. Without an external force whispering falsehoods, without an antagonist attempting to leverage our internal contradictions.
Like playing our heat against our cold, our sorrow against our joy.
Exactly. Without that, we would remain static. The profound tools we were given would lay dormant.
We would essentially revert to being hollow, wringing clay.
Yes.
That fundamentally changes how we view adversity. The struggle against deception and arrogance isn't a tragic accident of human history.
It is the required operating environment for the human machine.
The echo chamber of the wringing clay is ultimately filled by the noise of this specific conflict.
It is a daring, almost dangerous philosophical claim. The presence of a deceptive antagonist is a structural requirement for the completion of the human project.
Okay, that covers the trial of humanity. But what about the first reason for the respite? The text says the delay is granted so that he may fully earn his wrath.
That addresses the antagonist side of the equation.
It addresses the mechanics of free will and objective justice, right?
Exactly. The narrative establishes that the creator does not punish Iblis preemptively based solely on the internal genesis of arrogance.
Right. Iblis is given time, a runway.
He is allowed to fully manifest his internal wretchedness into external action.
He is given enough rope to hang himself.
Essentially, yes. He is allowed to fully execute his flawed hypothesis that fire is superior to clay.
And by granting the respite, the creator ensures that the antagonist's ultimate failure is entirely self-authored.
He earns the consequence through sustained, deliberate action over time, rather than just a momentary lapse in judgment. It is a profound demonstration of accountability.
But the text is very careful to clarify that this runway is not infinite. The third reason is to fulfill the promise, culminating in the phrase, until the day of the time well known.
And that boundary is absolutely crucial for the psychological stability of the human navigating the trial.
Because if the trial's eternal, it's not a trial, it's just torture.
Exactly. The concept of a time well known establishes that the cosmic rebellion and the resulting chaos and friction humanity must endure, they operate within strict, preordained parameters.
The antagonist is essentially on a leash. The experiment is closed.
The forces of arrogance and deception have an expiration date. They are finite.
And for the human being caught in the crossfire, struggling to exercise their intellect and manage their internal antagonistic opposites, this limitation is the anchor.
It means the friction serves a purpose, and more importantly, the friction will eventually end.
Let's zoom out a bit and look at the sheer density of what this single excerpt has constructed for us today.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. We started with the physical sourcing,
Huh.
the intentional gathering of alkaline and acidic, hard and soft soils.
Proving that human diversity was the primary design parameter from day one.
Right. Then we analyzed the application of kinetic energy in time, the kneading and hardening of the physical vessel until it reached a state of acoustic resonance.
The hollow, ringing clay suspended in a state of mathematical preparation.
Then we observed the ignition, the breathing of the spirit that transformed a highly complex anatomical object into an active, burdened subject.
We were equipped with an intellect that functions as a navigational muscle.
And a psychophysiology built on the tension of antagonistic opposites, a walking contradiction of joy and sorrow.
Which inevitably triggered the cosmic stress test.
Yeah, we diagnosed the anatomy of the first prejudice, an antagonist overpowered by his own wretchedness, masking his insecurity with the arrogance of his material origin.
Reducing the complexity of clay to a simplistic stereotype against his own fire.
And finally, we uncover the architecture of the human trial itself. The realization that the antagonist wasn't immediately destroyed because he is the required friction.
He is the resistance training necessary for humanity to actually utilize the tools of discernment.
All operating within the strict boundaries of a finite timeline.
It is a staggering synthesis of geology, physics, psychology, and philosophy, all mapping the blueprint of the human condition.
And this brings us to the core question for you, the listener. How does this ancient blueprint map onto your daily reality? Because the mechanisms described here are actively running in the background of your life right now.
Think about the concept of internal friction. How often do you feel the whiplash of antagonistic opposites in your own mind?
You experience profound joy and crushing sorrow, sometimes within the same hour.
You feel the heat of ambition and the coldness of apathy.
And we often interpret that friction as a sign of failure. We think, if I were better optimized, if I were healthier, I wouldn't feel this tension. I would just be smooth and consistent.
But according to the structural logic we just analyzed, if you feel that intense friction, you are not malfunctioning. You are operating exactly to spec.
You are built out of the hard and soft terrain. The tension is what holds the structure together.
If you eliminate the sorrow, the joy loses its baseline. The internal conflict is the proof that the machine is running.
And then there is the external conflict. We are required to use our thoughts to navigate with. We live in an era characterized by an overwhelming flood of information.
Where deception and falsehood are weaponized on a daily basis.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the trial. The requirement to discern truth from falsehood is arguably heavier now than at any point in history.
You are exercising that intellect every time you evaluate a claim, every time you resist a simplistic stereotype, and every time you refuse to let the fire of modern arrogance consume your critical thinking.
Which perfectly sets up the final thought we want to leave you with today.
Right.
We've spent this entire time analyzing the creation of the human hardware and software. But humanity has entered a new phase. We are no longer just the creation. We are actively attempting to become the creators.
We are attempting our own alchemy now.
Look at the development of artificial intelligence. What are we actually doing? We are sourcing raw materials from the earth.
We are taking silicon, which is quite literally refined from sand and dirt.
Exactly. We are structuring it with incredible mathematical precision. We are running electricity through it, which is our technological equivalent of the divine breath, the spark of life.
We are attempting to build our own ringing clay.
We are. We're writing code to give it an intellect to exercise and programming parameters to help it discern truth from falsehood. We are building the vessel and pouring a manufactured consciousness into it.
But if the structural logic of this ancient text holds true, a cognitive vessel isn't complete just because you turn it on.
No, it isn't complete until it faces the trial.
The intellect requires the friction of the antagonist to reach its potential.
So as we stand on the precipice of creating a true artificial mind, a silicon entity with thoughts to navigate with, what happens when it wakes up?
What is the necessary friction for a synthetic intellect?
When our creation opens its eyes, what is its iblis going to be?
Or perhaps the more terrifying question. In the cosmic hierarchy of creator and created, when the silicon mind begins to exercise its intellect, Are we going to be the ones providing the grace of the soft clay?
Or will our own wretchedness overpower us, and will we become the arrogant fire looking down at the sand?
A very heavy question of mechanisms, material, and mind for you to analyze.
Definitely something to ponder as you navigate the rest of your day.